Hello, friends and listeners, party people. Welcome back to another episode of Party XP. I'm your host, Lakan, and this is a solo episode, and more specifically, a solo review episode. So, a couple weeks ago, Jeff and I were able to do our first review on the podcast, like our first proper review on the podcast, for a game called Particulytics. So, we were reached out to for that one. We received a copy of the game, and we played it, and then talked about our opinion on it, and did a more traditional review style recording in comparison to our usual backlog, kind of like getting each other to try stuff out. And Jeff even had the opportunity to speak with the creator Julien for Particulytics, and so we were thinking, hey, these are actually pretty fun. We're gonna try to do a couple more review style episodes instead of the usual book club style usual format. This game jumped out at me when Jeff was letting me know about available games he had. So I decided, okay, you know what, I'll take a shot at this. Why not? I'll try my hand at a little bit more of a traditional review format for the podcast. I thought it would be fun. I hope you guys like this episode format. I'm excited to get into this one. So go ahead and grab yourself a snack and a drink. I've got myself some tahini-covered gummy bears. These are interesting. I like them. And I got myself a whipped strawberry banana Arizona. So yeah, why not? Let's go ahead and just enjoy ourselves here. So the game in this episode is going to be Wardrum. Wardrum is a tactical RPG mixed with a rhythm game roguelite. There's a couple different layers going on here, and I think it's a pretty fun mix. It's a little bit unconventional, but I think it's a surprisingly interesting combination. The game is developed by Mopeful Games and published by Team 17. And in this game, you lead a tribal warband across a fantasy world being corrupted by dark rhythm magic. There is a mysterious force trying to destabilize the world. The world itself is tied to the Rhythm Mother, a goddess worshipped by the War Drummers. You travel across a bunch of different biomes and different world map areas, trying to take down the evil forces who are trying to corrupt and destabilize the world. That's the basis of the story for the most part. You get a bit of like lore drop every time you find a new event, especially early on. And then you also get some more lore drops. When you finish each act, you end up in this like astral plane-esque location before choosing the next biome to go into. And you'll get some interactions with some other side characters as well. There's a shopkeep, there's kind of like an ambassador to the Rhythm Mother herself. And yeah, and you'll see a colorful bunch of enemies that you will face off against throughout your journey. Visually, this game is a mix of 2D pixel art along with 3D environments. It reminds me a lot of how Square Enix has been doing a lot of this like 2D pixel style for the character sprites, and then they do a 3D world map setting, right? Like Octopath Traveler has been a big influence of this. Some of the pixel remakes of the Final Fantasy stuff, I believe, as well, does a little bit of this, or the more modern, or the other recent Final Fantasy pixel games. There's a bit of dark fantasy aesthetics and elements as well, where you have your usual corrupted lands like forests and swamps, and there's also deserts and mountains. There's even Crypt and nighttime battles as well, which modify how your combat is going to go and how you have to plan out your fights. There's a bunch of different character sprites for your characters, of course, for your team to differentiate who's who. The enemies have pretty interesting looks to them as well. There's some your usual fare of like fantasy characters like goblins, dog-like monsters, giant bugs, evil sorcerer characters, other warrior characters, so on and so forth. There's a lot visually that's going on with this game, and I really, really like the design of it. There's a good variety going on. Big thing as well too is how the game has this dynamic camera, which is really interesting. It keeps the game visually interesting by shifting around when you are looking at the battlefield, scouting out your enemies and looking at what they can do, what their ranges are, what their attacks are. There's also a very quick shift with the camera takes when every time your character executes their combat. I'll go a little bit more into detail of that later on during the gameplay section. But yeah, there's a very cool dynamic flair to the battles, which is, again, just very fun, keeps it interesting, especially if you're not a huge fan of like the turn-based gameplay, you think it's relatively static and can get kind of boring, the added visual flair absolutely helps in keeping you visually stimulated and interested in the game. And a little bit I want to focus on here is the sound of the game. So obviously, as I mentioned before, it is a rhythm game mixed in with turn-based tactics gameplay. The soundtrack is obviously a major focus of the game. Music is heavily centered around percussion, rhythm, drums, the accompaniment. There's a constant accompaniment of music. Your sound will also shift focus when your attacks and your abilities are being used because you have to time your inputs to the beat of the background music. You'll hear the music kind of come up a little bit and kind of get focused on a little bit more. There are also some modifiers which makes them quieter as kind of like a debuff to you. We'll explain that a little bit more in the gameplay. The soundtrack is just this constant pulsing percussion focused music basically. It's heavily tribal inspired, much like the aesthetic of the characters in the game as well. And the sound design is very, very good. A lot of the weapons sound really nice. The music is good. The sound effects for the spells and your sword attacks, your hammer attacks, even the other monsters that show up on the field have very, very good sound design. It just has this really good audio feedback, basically, that just it's very satisfying. Everything in this game, because it's a rhythm game and a music game, underneath / part of its core, very, very much so focused on, and it just adds a nice atmosphere overall to the entire game. There's also a couple environmental sounds that you'll hear throughout the game. Again, just adds atmosphere, but all of it is still very, very clear for you to specifically, focus on the gameplay. It's all there, and it's just really nice sound, and it's very well designed. Okay, now we'll get a little bit into how you play the game. So, at the start of every run, you choose a team of up to 4 characters. During your early runs, your first couple runs, it's a tutorial. You'll only start off with 3, I believe. And then you'll recruit characters as you play the game. So you will start off with picking your characters. I'm going to go from, if you've already unlocked a couple things here, so you'll have a Wardrummer, and all of them have pretty fun names as well. So you'll start off with a Wardrummer, who is essentially mandatory to your team. I'm not far enough to see if I can remove him from the Either way, you would want him on your team anyway. He's kind of your core of your support spells and abilities and auras. He's kind of like the main focus of the team. Your team is always built around him, and he fits in basically every team style from my understanding. So you have your Wardrummer, the Elder Strong Wrist. He channels magic through the Wardrum, and again, he's kind of your main support character. Next up, you've got your warrior, Barak Bladestorm. He's your typical warrior character. Decent amount of health, sword character user, fast sword strikes, multiple strikes as well. He has like a all-around good melee character, deals high damage. Very useful. Next up is your barbarian, Stone Shoulders. He is your tank. He is a big dude. You can see him even in his pixel sprite. He's taller than everybody else. He has a giant warhammer. He has abilities to taunt and can immobilize himself on purpose and can essentially make himself the target of enemies to protect your other characters. Next up is Razine Sureshot. He is a bowman, big dude, big old belly. It's kind of funny because he's actually kind of like a pompous character. He's your typical ranged archer character. Always going to want to have a mix of ranged and melee characters here. Very useful, high damage, high crit chances, I believe, from all of his attacks. I think he has a higher base crit chance as well. A little bit squishier, obviously, but, still a very, very useful character. I'm assuming he's probably relatively meta overall, because, again, I think range is a very important aspect of this game, or any tactics-based RPG game. Next up, we got the Rhythm Caster Emperor. She is your sorcerer. She has AoE spells. They're usually fire inspired from what it looks like. She can set traps on the ground that can debuff enemies or buff your teammates if they step into those traps. The biggest thing with her is that every time she casts a spell, she actually loses a bit of her life. So there's a bit of synergy going on with her and the Wardrummer, where the Wardrummer can have passive healing auras. She's obviously relatively squishy. Most of your ranged characters are relatively squishy in comparison to the melee characters. But she is one of the higher damage dealing characters out there. Next up, we have the Sentinel, Tall Togo. He is a younger character, like a younger, inexperienced soldier, warrior character, but he has a spear and he's super like brash minded. You can kind of hear him. He's like kind of got a cocky energy to him. He's a young guy. Kind of like if we go in order of like frontline characters, barbarians, your tanky boy, your warriors, your all around character. Sentinel is a little bit squishier, but he has higher range, and he has ability utility to him. Him and the barbarian early on get the ability to like move other characters out of the way or push them back a little bit. But yeah, Totogo is a useful character for when you're fighting hordes of enemies and they kind of start swarming you, because he can hit multiple tiles with one attack, with his regular attack, versus the rhythm caster, who has to have a little bit of range to her, and yes, can hit a larger area, but she cannot be like, you don't want her on the front lines. You want her spaced out away from other enemies. And then the last up that I have unlocked so far is the Spirit Shaman. The Spirit Shaman is named Beatrix Spirit Singer. She's an older character, imagine like an older, wiser female character. She summons spirits to fight for her, basically. She's also like a support character. She buffs and debuffs the team from the back line. She's a fun character to use, again, kind of like your support. Kind of, I guess, like a cleric, or maybe like a necromancer. I don't know, like maybe like a druid, essentially, kind of in some ways. So that's your main 7 character cast. You start off with only 4, I believe, and you have to unlock the other 3 in like the post game area, where you spend a bit of your currency to unlock other characters and also buff your characters. That is the roguelite aspect of the game. So every character can get stronger as the more and more you play the game. And there's also an 8th character that you have to unlock. I have not gotten to that point yet. I'm only about 12-ish hours into the game so far. I've had 2 really deep runs and have not gotten a winning run yet. But I think I'm relatively close on like breaking through that wall. I'm on the cusp of it right then and there. But there's an 8th character who I have not looked into yet. I saw someone talking about it on like one of the community discussion pages of it, saying it's kind of like an assassin character. So that's kind of cool. I haven't gotten around to him yet. I haven't looked them up. I'm kind of just going by my experience currently of what I've played through in the game myself, not scoping too far ahead. So after you choose your team, you start off with a team of 4, and then I believe on the map there's also an opportunity to gain a 5th character, which is kind of nice, so that as you get to the harder difficulties or you move further along the map, you have more units available to you, able to deal with the increasing number of enemy mobs throughout the game. And your team comp, obviously, again, you kind of want to have like your frontline guys. Like a mix. You want to have like a mix of like frontline guys and have like a ranged character in there as well to kind of cover each other's weaknesses, and also have some extra utility around the battle grid or the map, essentially, while you're in combat. You are on a world map. It has a relatively similar format to the world map from Slay the Spire or Peglin or many of the other roguelites nowadays. It's not like a standardized map layout, but like you've definitely seen it at this point. It's definitely like relatively familiar if you played any of the roguelike games that involve you choosing and picking your battles. So you'll have the opportunity to go into combat, like find fights, go into question marks for random events, elite fights, which are much more difficult but usually higher rewards. So you're taking the risk reward there. Treasure chests for a trinket so that you can equip it onto your characters. Each character has 2 trinket slots available to them, which increase base stats, increase crit chance, increase damage. Has other added effects like healing, like passively if you fulfill certain criteria. And also backpacks, or like satchels, it looks like is the image for it. That is your shops, so then you can buy again more items to use in battle, or trinkets to again customize your characters and again change their stats up a little bit. There are also even areas where you to revive allies. Your allies can get downed in combat, can also get killed in combat, and you can revive them after you beat or clear a biome and beat the boss of that area. You'll go into like a hub world altered plane. That's where again you can do your reviving your allies. There's a shop here, so you can buy more trinkets or items, and then choose the biome you want to head into afterwards. when you finish a run or lose a run, you will have the chance to spend some extra currency, which you can gain during your runs, where you can unlock other characters, increase base stats, unlock abilities earlier, open up your skill tree a little bit more. Yeah, there's a skill tree here. There's a lot of customization in terms of the gameplay for the characters. Now, they combine rhythm game mechanics with the turn-based tactical combat. So think of a Fire Emblem, Advanced Wars, Final Fantasy Tactics, where you are moving around a grid. Enemies are placed on the opposite side, and you have to kind of meet somewhere in the middle, or advance your character units towards the enemy units, and hopefully prep yourself when they attack, and you can hopefully attack them first, and so on and so forth. Right? So it's turn-based combat. And on the map, there are things like special tiles, like spiky areas, shrubbery, like brush, hazards like barrels, exploding crystals. Some of the spiky areas you can stand in, and you can reduce your incoming damage. Same with the brush, you can reduce your incoming damage, or you can move or push enemies into them, or they can move you into them, and you will take more damage for doing so. So there's obviously a good amount of strategy here going on. You can set up traps. Sometimes there are traps already set up on the map that are neutral. Again, you can knock enemies into them or pull them into them, or they can push you into them, and so on and so forth. Some increase your damage output, some reduce your damage output, some can increase your critical hit ratio, some penalize you. Again, there's a lot of stuff going on the map that can kind of slow you down or weaken you for a turn or two, and that's just the world, or the combat grid. And then of course they're not even taking into account to actual combat itself. So the combat is the big focus of this game. That's where the rhythm minigame aspect shows up in this game. So any attack, any spell you cast requires you to input a bunch of timed commands. If you are playing on mouse and keyboard, it can be anywhere from your spacebar to your key inputs, like mostly circling around like QWER, ASDF, spacebar, and then mouse clicks, left and right. So there'll be a couple different button presses there, or even some combinations of buttons, which you'll learn over time. You can hover over your attacks and abilities to see what they are. If you're playing controller, it is your face buttons. It'll be your ABXY, or your square, triangle, circle, X, and your all of your shoulder buttons. Your R1, R2, L1, R2, or your triggers, whatever you want to call them, your bumpers and your triggers. And again, some like cool combinations of just they make the game a little bit more difficult when they start getting the higher damaging attacks and spells. They start combining stuff. The attacks and abilities are always a set input of buttons, unless they get modified by the enemies, who can like bleed you or poison you, and you'll have to do extra buttons or change your button inputs. Or if you get confused, well, it'll just change your button input straight up. You have to press different combinations than what you're used to for your standard setup. I'll give you an example. For the Wardrummer, his basic attack, the 1-2, it's spacebar, left click, spacebar, left click on beats 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you'll literally just be playing it along to the downbeats of the game. You'll hear the music pulsing in the background. So in combat, it'll show you a quick demo of the input. So you'll get essentially a one measure lead-in where it gives you a demonstration, and then immediately afterwards you will do your inputs as well, again in time with the music in the background. It starts off relatively simple with just 4 beat inputs, or once on every beat inputs, and then you can they'll start getting a little more complex with adding like 8th note inputs in there, and even some doubled up, essentially 16th notes that they will treat in there as well too, where you have to press twice relatively quickly in the span of 1 beat. The synergy of the rhythm execution and the tactical decision making is where the game really kind of shines, right? Again, that rhythm aspect is super interesting. I really like it so far. And it's just like a fun way to keep you involved. A big thing for me, as I mentioned before, is like one of my favorite games is Legend of Dragoon. Clear Obscure obviously has a similar-ish mechanic to this. Even South Park, the South Park RPG games have a similar mechanic where you are pressing in rhythm or in time with your attack striking again so you can get another attack. Legend of Dragoon has very particularly timed and different rhythms for their attacks. Clair Obscur also has, again, same thing where you press more, the more damage you end up doing here. And in this game is relatively similar, where the more accurate you are in your button inputs, the more damage you can do, the higher crit chance you get. Or if you miss a lot, then of course your damage output can be dropped as well too. I know it may sound like a lot here going on, but for the most part, it's just like every attack rhythm is a rhythm mini game, and then you just play essentially for the most part. You play the rest of the game as like the typical grid-based tactical RPG. One thing I did take notice of though, at addition of the rhythm mini game gameplay of this, it does tend to inflate the amount of time turns go for. Because obviously, instead of just choosing what you want to do and then doing so, you do have to do the input. So battles can feel a little bit longer than usual. I've got I've got a couple runs under my belt so far. Some of the runs have gotten easily over an hour. So the turns can feel a little slow or feel a little bloated. Requires a little bit of focus because the games do start to run a little bit long. There are some pretty large enemy groups, and occasionally sometimes extra enemies jump into combat randomly depending on the time of day you go into combat. So again, it feels like the fights start to get a little bit longer in comparison to a typical tactical RPG game. In the later levels, you have a lot more to deal with as well. There are more enemies that have debuffs, anything from like poison to confusion to deafening. There's some cool mechanics, the way that they handle your typical RPG fare here going on, like your typical your buffs and debuffs, and from yours and from enemies. A lot of cool stuff, that the way that affects your gameplay, which is pretty interesting here. So you can also apply some of these debuffs to enemies, which is super useful. The status effects directly interfere with your rhythm gameplay. So it'll alter your inputs or obscure your timing cues or your audio cues. So I'll give you an example. If I use the warrior, his typical attack is A and then 3 spacebar hits. Again, all on the beat. So it's A, spacebar, spacebar, spacebar. With that, let's say I get bled. So I will have to do one extra input randomly added into the chain. So it can be anywhere from like A on first beat, on the end of the first beat, I have to press F and then spacebar, spacebar, spacebar. So there's that. Or if I'm poisoned, same thing again. It'll alter the input and give me another. And also give me another one again that I have. And if you miss it, I think if I recall correctly, you take an extra tick of poison damage as well. Aside from this, the tick of damage you take in the beginning of the turn. If you are confused, it changes all of the inputs of your attack. So it'll be, instead of just being 4 buttons of your A, spacebar, 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 it can be anywhere from like Q, E, R, F, T, left click, right click, and it'll just change up to all 4 of your inputs. The one other one is the deafened, where it makes the music much quieter for that character. The background music kind of quiets down. You still hear it, which is nice to see, and there's still the visual cue as well. So you just you can just follow along. And once your line hits the middle of the diamonds are the indicators for your inputs. You still have to press the inputs there. It doesn't change. It doesn't make it like more or less accurate. It just it's just you don't have the pulsing drums underneath for you to help you line up your attacks basically. And then one thing I forgot to touch upon before, the beginning of battle, there is a prep phase. Depending if you are in regular combat or you are ambushed. So in regular combat, you can also surprise enemies, which is nice, so that enemies will take extra damage on your first turn. So your prep phase, you can place your units on your side of the map essentially. And kind of place them wherever you need to, right? The map layout is randomized. You can have them split up a little bit more. Sometimes it'll set you up at the top and the bottom, or you can keep your units all together, depending on how the map randomly sets up your units. The way I've been playing, I play relatively safe a lot of these times because I don't play a lot of these turn-based strategy games anymore. I used to a lot more back in the day, but for now, I just haven't really a lot of them haven't really drawn my interest. I will usually put my range character and a tanky character together, and my support character and another one of the the melee tankier characters together, if they're split up, or if I have the chance, or if the map lays it out that all of my characters are on the same side of the map, I will put my two tankier characters in the front, and then two range characters or support character in the back, and then all of them will advance essentially right then and there, while keeping, again, your integral character is your Wardrummer. You want to keep him kind of in the middle of the fray. Thankfully, he's not super squishy, and again, he has a plethora of spells to heal, to increase defense, to increase attack, and can also attack himself. Every character in this game has a basic attack that can be used every turn, and then special attacks or skills or spells have a cooldown, which you also have to account for. There's multiple layers built into the combat here. I don't think it's like all fluff. I absolutely think it's very deliberate choices here, and I think that like it just is it's a bunch of stuff that, once you understand the systems of the game, is a very robust, very fully fleshed out RPG, not just like an RPG with a splash of like rhythm components basically. You can attack through units, which is nice as well. For the bowman, your spellcaster can also hit your own teammates, so you do have to worry about positioning as well there. You want to try to keep your frontline units in a way that you can hit enemies without, and have available spaces around the enemy, so that you can also throw out your AoE spells without hitting your own teammates. So again, a little bit of planning there. Certain characters can again strike through your ally tiles and not have to worry about accidental team damage. And every unit basically has a bunch of different specializations, so you can. This is where a lot of the character expression shows up, where you have a lot of options to make certain characters just be raw damage output, more utility focused, and everyone has a bit of A and B here, like where there can just be raw damage output, a little bit of extra utility. But again, it's just overall just very nice and flexible, which I like. Where I can make my tank just a typical tank character, just constantly drawing aggro, keep him healed up and topped off in defenses, and he also still hits like a truck, which is great. Or I can make him more of a character that moves enemy units. So, space yourself out, protect other units yourself. He has ability to, your Berserker, again, has his ability to even defend your teammates as well, reducing damage if they get attacked in gameplay. And every time you finish combat, you gain experience. And when you level up, you have the ability to choose one of two attacks or skills for your character. Early on, it's only you just gain one. Eventually, you will unlock other attacks and abilities in the, again, post-game, post-run area, where you can where the roguelite aspect of the game shows up, and have permanent increases of abilities, stats, raw damage numbers, so on and so forth for your characters. Again, a good amount of customization available to all the characters here. If one of your characters goes down early on, I believe they just die, and then you can revive them at the post biome or like level area, like the hub world or the astral plane, where you have a chance to revive a character. Or if they get injured later on down the line, instead of dying, you can make it so that your characters can get injured once or twice before dying, and you can essentially revive them at an oasis. If a character does get injured, they can still stay in combat. They will be alive on the grid for you, but they will usually have like a debuff on them. Like they have less movement, so they can move like one less tile. They take like extra 20% damage, and if they go down again, then they die. Again, you have the chance to revive them at the astral plane hub area after biomes. Your characters also do have a bit of a comeback mechanic. It's built into the game, where if a character does go down, all of the rest of the remaining characters that are still on the board gain a percentage damage buff, and which also increases the more characters that go down. That being said, if you get whittled down to like 2 or 1 character, if you have not taken out a bunch of the other enemies on the map, can very much so still get overrun relatively easily by the rest of the remaining enemies on the board. while there is a comeback mechanic, it's not a get out of jail free card. Your characters don't just become like a walking juggernaut that can just take on the world. It's more that, along with smart gameplay, smart positioning, well thought out execution of enemies, you have a chance. You are given a fighter's chance to get out of combat and hopefully get through the next couple combats and get to an oasis or get to the end of the level, which will be obviously a little more difficult trying to take on the boss with a lower number of characters. But you have a chance to revive them and keep the run going. So, what do I think about this game? Overall, I think it is a very interesting roguelite. There's a bunch of different gameplay layers here, some which may click more than others for certain people, as it does for me. Again, I really like the rhythm minigame aspect. The typical roguelite world map is, comfortable for me. I've seen it in plenty of other games before at this point. The turn-based tactics combat, again, I'm not the biggest on nowadays, but I like the overall feel of this melting pot of a bunch of different gaming aspects. Some people may find that the rhythm combat is fun initially and then may start to drag on a little bit more, may start to feel a little bit monotone or heavy as the run goes on and kind of just, gets a little bit stale over time. I very much so enjoy it. I like the fact that it keeps me engaged in the turn-based combat. That is, for me, really stands out. The audio cues, the visual cues, all very good, very clear, all important for a rhythm game. Very well thought out, very well laid out. I like the amount of progression that is given to you, the fact that your characters do get stronger over time. There is also an option for easier difficulty right off the bat as well. If you are not big on rhythm games, or you are not rhythmically inclined or musically inclined, timing those button presses, it just makes them a little more generous for you to do your inputs, so that way you're not penalized as hard for not being able to press on time. There is a visual and audio calibration, very much so, very similar to a Guitar Hero or a Rock Band, where you will press inputs in time with a metronome click and a visual, like, again, when the line goes over the diamond, you press when it overlaps, and that's your, again, a way for you to sync it up. So just make sure you do take that into account if you're playing on a monitor or a TV. On the downside, I believe that I have had a couple moments where the game has felt a little bit repetitive, especially when I get to like the more difficult areas. I've gotten to like the third biome, and some of the fights start getting a little bit rougher, and I feel like the difficulty scales a little bit too fast sometimes, especially early on. To be fair, I have not unlocked all of the skills and abilities. I've not done a whole lot of brainstorming in how I want to build my team or really cover all of the weaknesses of my team so far. I've had some pretty lucky runs, to be fair. In the later fights, they started getting a little bit repetitive. Again, depending on if you are a rhythm guy, again, that for me keeps the game relatively fresh. But it does feel a little bit grindy when you get to the little bit of the later parts of the runs. Also, narratively, the game has has the backstory set up. I'm not sure if it's exactly the most enthralling story. If you are a big story guy, I think this game might not be as much for you. The world building is there. You kind of have to like do a little bit of learning by yourself. Similar to like Slay the Spire, where a lot of the lore is like when you're kind of looking at the background or you're doing the interactions with the other NPCs around the map. You talk to the shopkeeper, they can tell you a little bit. There's a character called Djembe, which is kind of like your ambassador to the Rhythm Mother, who also gives you lore drops. So it's there, but you have to really pay attention for it if you're really digging for it, if you really want to. Even some of the enemies, the bosses, they do a little bit of expo dumping if you want to talk to them and see why they're doing what they do. So like I think it's a little bit limited, but like if you really want the lore, I think it's gonna be a little bit light for a lot of other people. But for me, if I'm playing a game like this, I'm just kind of absorbing the entire thing as like I'm kind of like just letting myself get absorbed by the entire thing. The story may not be the strongest thing there, but I'm still enjoying the gameplay overall. Now, would I recommend this game? I think I would. I think it's a very interesting concept. The rhythm aspect is fun. The turn-based tactics RPG aspect is fun. The RPG progressions, I think, is pretty good in terms of like how you want to be able to customize and specialize your characters. which allows you to do a bunch of different builds and team compositions. I'm sure there are some that are more meta than others. I am kind of, again, we're still relatively early on. I've enjoyed kind of just messing around and kind of playing a relatively safe team, and then doing a little bit of, specialization of making some characters do more damage, or some characters be more utility based. There's some parts of it which is a little bit forgiving, some parts of it which is a little bit less forgiving. There's a nice balance point. I think they're relatively close to it, but I think that maybe a little bit of fine tuning is required for you to get what you want out of this game. So I'm looking this up on Steam just to confirm. Unfortunately, there is no demo available, and the game is for sale for $20. Reminder once again that we did receive a free code for this game. That being said, all opinions are my own, and the developers will not see this podcast before we release it. For $20, I think this is a pretty solid buy. I think if it was on sale for like 15, it'd be a little bit easier to stomach for a lot of other people, maybe 10. Again, unfortunately, no demo for you to just try it out. But if you were kind of on the fence with this game, that being said, again, if you are a fan of all these different genres, and if you like roguelikes, if you like the turn-based tactical RPG stuff, if you like rhythm games, I think it's a solid buy. The core of the game is absolutely well built. The foundation's absolutely there. Hopefully down the line they can do a couple of fine tweaks, some balance tweaking, maybe a little bit more content down the line. As I said before, I haven't fully beat a run yet. I haven't explored all of the content of the game. I haven't explored all of the content of this game at all. There's a lot more for me to learn about. All of my characters still have to get buffed and unlock all their skills and abilities, and just more for me to play still. But I think this is absolutely a solid title. A little bit more that has to go into it to play the game versus Particulatrix, which is like a typical top-down shooter. A little bit more thinking on this one. Very well reviewed so far. It is currently sitting at a very positive 85% score on Steam. 74 reviews, user reviews on the game are positive. I think it absolutely hits like a particular niche of roguelite gamers who really like that roguelite gameplay. And again, just has a couple splashes, breaks down the usual format of these types of games with the addition of the rhythm mini game aspect of the game. I think it's a very cool idea, and I'm looking forward to playing some more of it. Okay, I think that'll be it for me for this episode. If you guys got all the way through the review, thank you guys so much for the support. Hope you guys like this episode. Leave us a like, leave us a review, share it with a friend. We really appreciate the support from all of you guys, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care. So I think that in particular, I think in particular to this game, it is. Oh, what am I even talking about? What the hell am I doing?